Dear brothers and sisters, in the Jewish calendar, right these days, there is a feast, the Feast of the Tabernacles. It's a powerful symbol, and I'd like us to think about it as a symbol of baptism. It's called the Feast of the Tabernacles, or the tents, but these are special tents, as we read it in the book of Nehemiah in chapter 8 from verse 14 to 18. Those who returned from the exile, they remembered how gracious God was with them on their journey. Originally Moses ordered this feast to remember the liberation from Egypt, but those who were brought to captivity, when they returned, they remembered God's good grace. Go out to the hills and bring branches of olive, wild olive, myrtle, palm, and other leafy trees to make booths, as it is written. And all the assembly of those who had returned from the captivity made booths and lived in the booths. The tent, or the Sukkoth, is a special tent. We wouldn't make too much use of it in this rainy weather. It's made of branches, deliberately. You can see through the branches, you can see either the skies, the starlit sky, or the clouds which are pouring down rain. This Jewish feast is celebrated not in the actual time of the Exodus at springtime, when spring comes with warm wind and the sun is promising the beauty of summer, but it is celebrated when cold winds begin to blow, like today, and drizzling rains sudden in the autumn. The birth and bringing up of a child is the fruit of their parents' hard work. In a sense, your child is that little beautiful fragile tent made of your efforts. Baptizing a child is a reminder that it is an ongoing journey. In a sense, baptism is a reminder of the fact that life is fragile, like that tent. It needs support, extra care. In Christian baptism, in Iona's baptism, we confess that we need God's help. Today we are standing in front of God like the Jews stood when they built their fragile tents. This feast, as I mentioned, falls on the autumn. To dwell in booths in the spring was no trial of their belief in providence. The weather was nice, there were parties all around, people could have enjoyed their stay in the tent. To do so at the approach of winter is to proclaim to the world that the chosen people were prepared to face hardship for their covenant with God. The Bible does not give a detailed direction for the building of the tent. Neither does it define what constitutes dwelling in that tent. It is a bit like with parenting and baptism, the covenantal journey of the parents itself. The actual erection of the booth was an adventure in which young and old used to participate in enthusiasm. Surrounding themselves with life's necessities, in this imperfect temporary abode, the Jews were further reminded of their uncertain lease of life and of the need at all times to cast their eyes heavenward, to cast their eyes heavenward. They relived the experiences of their ancestors, how joyful it was to be liberated by God, and return to the promised land. They remembered the sufferings and hardships of their forefathers, but they gave wholeheartedly thanks for their liberation and God's grace. Dear brothers and sisters, baptism within the liturgy shows us being in a similar position. We know that God will richly bless this child and her family, but we have to be ready to work for the child's future. There will be hardships in this new Christian life, but we know that God will can give her a safe arrival to the full joy of Christian faith. But until then, parents, godparents, relatives, and members of our congregation will be the child's tent builders. We are reminded by our symbol, the tent, of which branches the stars of the sky or the rainy clouds can be seen. We have to be aware that keeping the Christian faith alive is a laborious work. It's a toiling journey. Setting an example to remain faithful to our baptismal vows, saying no to the works of Satan, saying a full yes to God's goodness and the godly way of life, it is a hard toiling. Dear Talisa, Maxwell, Quezanvo, Sabrine, Edwina, Daniela, and Adani, we are reminded of this laborious journey. But we also know that during our joint journey with the child, we shall be enjoying heavenly protection. So for us Christians, the feast of baptism is our feast of the Tabernacles. We are reminded of the hardships and the moments of being lost on this journey. But this child's feast, the symbols of the fulfillment of faith, like the anointing with the oil of the catechumens, with the oil of the chrism and the candle of faith which we are going to lit, also remind us that we anticipate our ultimate happiness with God, which we shall enjoy in our final abode, in the most safe tent, in the house of love, heaven. Dear brothers and sisters, there is a further and last symbol of the tent of the Feast of the Tabernacles. It has another important symbol, the building materials and the fruits used in the feast itself. The 4 plants used in the feast. The golden citrus and the tall palm branch decked with sprigs of flowering myrtle and graceful willow, these 4 species mentioned in Leviticus chapter 23 verse 40, they represent different types of persons, each with his or her own virtues and shortcomings. And these all combine, these all symbolize one common effort to serve God and bring us up this child in a godly way. Thus, the ethrog, a fruit both pleasant in appearance and in fragrance, typifies comeliness, fragrance of reputation, and fruitful activity. The willow, those who lack both beauty and fragrance, who produce no fruit easily. So how honest this feast is, it also shows our shortcomings. The myrtle used in the tent, in building the tent, which is fragrant and comely in appearance, but bears no fruit, resembles the pious who are not productive, while the lulav, possessor of safety, height, and fruit-bearing even in the desert, typifies those who have endurance, dignity, and goodwill, and give of their best in thought and action. This is what happens through Ayana's life journey. This is what happens in our whole lives. We practice our virtues and we fall and we experience our shortcomings. But the whole person is put in the service of God. The baptism which we celebrate today and the work of support to the newly baptized are similarly reminders of Christian virtues. The plants in the tent symbolize virtues. The etrog resembles the heart. Both must be flawless. The willow is shaped like a mouth, as the former drinks of the water by the side of which it grows, so must it drink at the perennial fountain of the Bible. The myrtle, cast in the shape of the human eye, bids us be pleasant in character, while the lulav, fashioned like the spinal cord, is a sermon in uprightness. But back to our Christian symbols. The baptism which we celebrate today is a similar reminder of our Christian virtues, starting with the theological virtues, faith, hope, and the love of God, as they come purely from God. So let our task be to think about those virtues of ours, our human virtues, which all of us must practice in order that this child might arrive to a fully adult Christian faith, and that we ourselves might arrive to our final abode, which God has prepared for us. So let the building blocks of Ayana's journey be these virtues: temperance, humanity, charity, benevolence, generosity, sacrifice, diligence, patience, kindness, humanitas, satisfaction with life, compassion, and humility. Amen.